Hello, everyone. This is the Cluster PI Office Hour. Today is January 14, 2026. And as usual, in our agenda, we start reminding everyone that this meeting abides to the CNCF Code of Conduct. So please be kind with each other. Okay, after that, what we do usually is we welcome new attendees. So if in this meeting today, there are people that want to introduce themselves, please speak up. Okie dokie, I don't see hand raised, so I keep going. We have two open proposals. I don't know if there are updates that are pending feedback for maintainer. We will get there hopefully soon. Okay, there are no, I also invite everyone else to comment on the proposal. So it's not only responsibility of the maintainer to provide feedback, but everyone could show interest and make those proposals richer and better. Okay, let's continue with our agenda. So first I have a heads up from the SIG leads channel, a discussion that is going on. So there was a little bit of confusion for the maintainer track this year, or not really a confusion. The rule were pretty clear, but what happened is that for many SIG there was more submission than usual, and the spot available are limited. So just to avoid misunderstanding, the rule are more or less that there is a spot for each SIG, and if for a SIG there was more than one talks, what happened is that if the talk was not submitted to following the process, which is you have to ask a SIG lead to submit. So if someone which is not a SIG lead submitted, the talk was ignored and directed by CNCF. The remaining for the remaining talks, one was selected. Unfortunately, between the selected talks, a few of them were not respecting the CNCF guideline, like number of speakers, etc., etc. Those one has been whitelisted. Whitelisted talk should have a spot reserved and should get the spot as soon as the issue is fixed. But yeah, it was more confused than last times. Next KubeCon, we will try to. I think that we should give a better guidance as a SIG. And yeah, I will figure it out how to do it. Mike.
Yeah, I guess I was just kind of curious about that too, because like I was on a couple maintainer tracks and I saw one of them got waitlisted. But so are you saying that like somehow people were submitting more maintainer tracks than the actual SIGs were aware of? Is that what
Yes.
happened? Oh, okay. Oh, wow. Interesting. Okay, thank you.
Yes. There were a couple of SIGs submitting more than 5 talks with one spot available.
Oh, wow. Okay, that's quite ambitious. I thought it was like one or two talks.
Nope.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
And by the way, I brought this up with the contributor contribacks a couple of times because one spot for a SIG like SIG cluster Lifecycle, the test 20 sub-project is really nothing, basically.
Yeah,
But
absolutely.
this is what it is.
Yeah, I think that definitely the density of the SIGs should have an impact on the slots because like, for example, like SIG Cloud Provider, it's like, yeah, we get one slot, but I can't imagine us ever using more than one slot, right? But like you just said, SIG Cluster Lifecycle, there's all sorts of projects in there, right? We could have one discussion about Cluster API, And we could have an entirely another session about, how bootloading is done or something. It has nothing to do with cluster API, right?
Yeah. Unfortunately, this is what it is. It is a trade-off between what they would like to do and room available and all the complexity of organizing on such a big event. So,
Yeah, absolutely. It sounds more like a steering committee kind of topic or something, anyways. Yeah, thank you.
mm. Okay, so we have another topic in agenda. David, I think. Yeah.
Oh, are we talking about the next one, the KCP?
Yep, you're saying.
Okay. Yeah. Sorry, I don't know who's. Fabrizio, do you mind opening that? Thank you. So yeah, today I think there are sort of limited checks that KCP performs when it performs the rollout of control plane machines. Of course, right, the new machine has to bootstrap, join the cluster. API server has to be healthy and etcd and all of that. But I ran into an interesting scenario. I describe it in one of the last comments here, but I'll try to describe it concisely. And I in this scenario, the checks that KCP performs are not really enough. And anyway, so the scenario is that I misconfigured the API server, and so the new API servers that were being rolled out were unable to talk to the CNI plugin that was running locally. They weren't able to authenticate with it. And what this meant was that the API server could actually accept requests, and it could talk to etcd, and everything was, everything that the API server sort of, the core functionality was fine. However, because it couldn't talk with CNI, it then couldn't reach services on the cluster, and that included the webhooks. And Cluster API has webhooks, and the mutating and validating webhooks. And in order to to make any further modifications, right, those webhooks have to be reachable. And so what was interesting was that once I got into this situation, I did not have a way of fixing my configuration by updating Cluster API resources, because those updates would in themselves fail. And yeah, so this is I guess what I don't know if we've talked about this dependency of Cluster API, depending on, of course, the webhooks, and via the API server, and yeah, but it made me wonder whether there should be additional checks. For example, this is totally right. This is not very well thought out. There might be problems with this, but you could imagine having some check for that new control plane machine, the API server being able to talk to the Cluster API webhooks, for example, right? That would have prevented this scenario. Anyway, so yeah, just wanted to. There's been an issue for I think about a year and a half, kind of on a related topic. So yeah.
Stefan.
Yeah, I have one question for clarification, and then I can give a bit of backstory why this issue exists from our point of view. The question is, you're talking about a self-hosted scenario, right? Cluster API running on managing its own cluster, and that's why you have webhooks on the workload cluster.
Yes.
Just to wish.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah,
Makes sense. Okay. So where this issue was coming from was the following. Basically, we had a situation that with an, I don't know which Kubernetes version it was, but essentially it was a Kubernetes version where I think we had an issue with kubeproxy or something, and the problem was working out in a way that during an upgrade, I think kubeproxy was entirely down on the control plane components. And then once we were done with upgrading all control plane nodes, only afterwards kubeproxy worked again. And we did not notice because basically KCP did absolutely not care about that essentially the control plane nodes were not functional during an upgrade. And the end-to-end test coverage was only checking that afterwards everything is fine. Also, maybe a bit, I just realized that this issue can be read in multiple ways. So one way that might be intuitive to read it is that, I don't know, we maybe just want to add more conditions or something. But just the way that Fabrizio wrote it here. But the background is essentially that whenever we create or delete a machining, just for everyone here, probably half of you are aware of it anyway. But the background is that whenever KSP creates or deletes a machine, we run something called pre-flight checks. And pre-flight checks is checking a bunch of stuff like NCD cluster health, but also it iterates through machines, checks the existing conditions on those machines that are partially also set by KCP itself. And basically, whenever it sees a machine that has, like, I don't know, API server down or whatever, then it waits for that API to come up before completing a rollout. And the original idea was essentially okay, we realized this is not enough because if during an upgrade, basically, kubeproxy can be just entirely down and KCP would absolutely not care about it, then that's not fine. What we weren't sure about is essentially that, first of all, what are the other things that we can check, and also which of them are basically standardized, right? I mean, if you would basically hard code in KCP, I don't know, the kubeproxy pod on the control plane is up. This only works if you're actually using kubeproxy, of course. If you're using Cilium, won't work. And a bunch of other stuff. So I think one part is definitely figuring out what is the kind of stuff that we can check. And then maybe also, I mean, which of that we can basically just hard code to. We always want to check it. Maybe which of those you can turn on and off. And maybe even we want to do something extendable if there is some fancy check that someone else wants to run. And then maybe case we should check, like we have this concept of readiness gates in general on machines. So it could also be something that basically this logic is checking in general the machine readiness. And that machine readiness can be configured to include custom conditions, essentially. So if people want to write their own custom health checking that does stuff that is absolutely not upstreamable, we could also consider including that essentially in the decision of, hey, can we move on? Is this machine actually healthy or not? But in all of this, and that was our problem with this, and why we didn't just fix something. We're not entirely sure which sort of stuff we can check and which ones, I mean, in a sense, sorry, if we block on certain things, they might lead to deadlocks depending on what people are doing. So what you're wondering is something like, I don't know, if you have a control plane machine, basically, if you want to have that machine and node entirely healthy, then you also need a cloud provider. In most scenarios, like, and a cloud provider vSphere running, because that cloud provider vSphere is the one thing that adds the provider ID on the node. And only if you have the provider ID on a node, we are able to make that machine node connection and can figure out if the node is ready, and only then the machine becomes ready. So if you would say, wherever we're using those checks, we are basically blocking on that. And us, by blocking on that, we somehow block other people from deploying the cloud provider. That would be a total disaster. That's why we're like, not sure what to do here and what is safe or not. I think one safe approach could be definitely, I don't know, if you start writing up a list of ideas on what is the kind of stuff you want to check, what do we feel like is standardizable or not, and then maybe we just try to gradually integrate it, like you were suggesting somewhere in your last comment, like maybe just make this bit of opt-in for the start or opt-out, and then we see what people report, and then once we have like a bit of experience with that, because I think we need. I think we can implement something, but I think we need some cycles of feedback of people doing whatever they're doing with KCP and cluster API and reporting back to us if their weird way of running it broke it, or sorry, our additional check in combination with however they're using all of this broke them or not. I mean, to be honest, I don't even know for ourselves, like just on top of my head, like if I check for node readiness, which I think also includes CNI readiness, which probably covers like a large part of what we would like to do. Without testing it, I don't know if it breaks us. I'm not 100% sure. Yeah, that's my random thoughts on the topic.
Thanks.
But I think it's important.
Yeah,
just to be clear, I think the current state is not good, and I would really like to improve it.
Yep. Is there someone else who want to comment? Otherwise, I add to my 2 cents. So yeah, definitely agree. This is why we opened the issue, but it's trickier than it's tricky. It's control plane, and from one side what you have to check, from the other side you need to be able to unblock. I think that considering how cluster API is shipping out recent changes, I think that the way to go is to consider adding more conditions, because it is visible for the user. It can be easy, the user see a block and understand what's going on, and also you have the benefit that the condition bubble ups. So we have to think about availability gates or readiness gates we have on the machine. So we have to think about along this line. But yeah, I sort of agree with the comment that we have to start thinking about this problem in a more structured way. David?
Yeah, also the fact that what I ran into happened on a self-managed cluster, and only would happen on a self-managed cluster, is also, I guess, that's one way that you could distinguish, checks. Some checks are just not needed in certain scenarios. So yeah, there's I agree that there's not really a clear it's not really clear what we should check for, and even if we did know that, it's not really clear what the consequences of that.
Yeah, exactly. Just to mention, so also today we are checking stuff, different stuff, depending on the fact that you are using internal etcd or self-managed etcd or external etcd. So there is already a certain degree of let me say of smartness, of intelligence behind this feature, but it currently only looks at control plane components. We have to, I think that if we rely on condition, we already have we already made the condition, the list of conditions that define readiness extensible, and so you can in theory add more, and add that if you, let me say, from one side, the KCP should add as much as possible according to his knowledge of the world. From the other side, there could be external controller that, I don't know, look at the storage solution or whatever you are running on the control plane. Stefan?
I mean, just to share, so what this prefab check is doing today is it's iterating through, if we have like a stacked etcd, it's iterating through 5 conditions. It is not looking at a ready condition.
Yeah.
But obviously it feels absolutely, I mean, if you think about a rollout scenario, I mean, this code is run not on, yeah, I think it's mostly done in rollouts actually. Yeah, but if you think about a regular rollout scenario, I mean, it absolutely makes sense that if the idea is that KCP only does one thing at a time, it only moves forward if stuff is healthy, it makes 100% sense that basically we wait until all machines are ready before we move on. It's just we're not doing it right now. And I think the way that we currently think about mostly is that basically one step could be basically as a next step to include the machine readiness. That machine readiness, if I remember correctly, should also already include node readiness, which already includes at least the free memory pressure discretion. I don't know what conditions. I'm not entirely sure if the the node reporting that CNI is not there, if this is also feeding into the conditions or if it's only feeding into the node status, but this might already also be included there. So I think you could already get a bunch of stuff by just checking the readiness, the ready condition on the machine and see if we can make that work essentially. Once we have that working, we could consider using the readiness gates essentially to even extend the scope of the ready condition further by a configuration to add like more things into ready on controllable machines. And I think then we already have like a relatively much more than today at least. And then the only question is maybe just, are there other cases that you don't want to put into condition for whatever reason, but we can look through the cases and just see if they all fit into conditions or if you find something that doesn't fit there. Yep. And just Daniel, to connect the points here, you shared this other issue in the chat around provide a way to surface arbitrary node conditions at machine level. So basically, if we have this idea that we say, okay, we check ready, and then you can extend the ready condition on the machine by also checking other conditions on the machine. And if you then would combine that with you can basically pull up conditions from the node to the machine. Then you are at a point where basically every single condition on the machine and every single condition on the node could be part of this readiness check. That's how far you would get with that. And then for the node conditions, I don't use node problem detector, I think, which adds conditions on the nodes, if I remember correctly. You could probably check all sorts of stuff. So I think this is definitely a path that would be worth playing around with, trying. I mean, I think I'm definitely in favor of improving this. I think we should let's just carefully feature gate in some way or another. I don't know if it is just literally a feature gate or if we maybe start with opt-in and then switch over to opt-out at some point. I mean, we can think about it. I think that's not the biggest problem in that. I think we find a way that we can move forward. Just have to do it in a clever way.
Yeah, that sounds good. Maybe I'll reach out to you on Slack to see where
absolutely
maybe I could start.
Yeah, then I also have a bit more time to do some research, depending on where the thread is going.
Okay, thank you. That's an interesting topic. Let me get back to the agenda. I thank you, Mike, which is taking notes. If there are no additional questions for this point, we are at the end of our agenda. So is there some provider update? I have a question for provider. Are there any issue question on bumping on the new copy version if you are already there?
Or
to the previous copy version?
I'm still working to update to 1.11 personally, but it's just it's just taking me a while to get back to it.
Yeah, for CAPC, we've had 1.11 in there for a while, but we haven't been able to do a minor release because of unrelated CI issues that I think I've just now figured out. So we should be able to do finally a release that includes 1.11, and I have a PR to do 1.12, and it's not really a problem. So I don't think there's any roadblocks. We just have been shooting ourselves in the foot, but I think that's over with.
Yeah, probably worth noting that Carpenter Cluster API is currently on 1.10 as well, and I'm looking at taking that to 1.11. But I just need to kind of figure out what the blast radius of the changes. I don't think it'll be as bad for Carpenter as it is for the KubeMark provider.
By the way, if someone wants to slow down the cadence, I think you only have to slow down the Kubernetes cadence.
Could we go to one release again?
Then we align accordingly. But the discussion is probably over in Kubernetes.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
No, but I mean, I think once we're all at beta 2, it will also become easier again. Right? I mean, beta 2, the new contract, the condition, that's all a lot of stuff to do. I really hope that afterwards it's becoming a lot less
Yes.
disruptive again.
This is kind of a question I have too, is like as I'm looking at how Carpenter, how the Carpenter provider will advance, and it's kind of a similar type of thing as with the cluster AP or the cluster autoscaler, where it's like, okay, Carpenter provider is kind of different from the cluster autoscaler. Cluster autoscaler, we're using all unstructured clients or dynamic clients, to like pull information back. But in Carpenter, we actually we vendor cluster API to get access to the API objects and everything. So I think at some level, like, I don't know if we're going to have to make a decision to say like, okay, the Carpenter provider, when it switches to 1.11 or 1.12, or when it switches to the new version, we'll probably have to switch to only supporting V1 beta 2, and we'll probably drop support for V1 beta 1 at that point. I don't know if there's any thoughts about that here, or like if anyone else is building tools on top of this stuff. But there's kind of
Yeah, as another small data point, I've also been maintaining cluster API add-on provider Helm, and it's up to date with CAPI. But what that means is we no longer support beta 1. And we just made sure to do a minor release for each one of those, so people who really need 111 or before or 110 or before can hang on a release. But it's not as complicated a code base, so it wasn't very hard to keep up to date.
Yeah, I guess, Matt, do you have plans in that case to like do any sort of like updates on the old branch? Because I guess you're right, like probably for Carpenter, we should tag it right before we switch to V1 beta 2.
Yeah.
Like, would we ever go back and fix that old branch? Like, would we take CVEs back there or something? Like,
Yeah, not until someone kicks and screams. So far, we've gotten away with it because, we don't do proper releases. It's still at a 0 dot release. And so everything gets released from main. So
nice.
if someone really needed a fix on, the 110 vendored version, I'm sure we could figure out a solution. But right now we just keep going forward.
Yeah, no, appreciate the discussion. This is good. Thank you.
If I can give my 2 cents, I think that is for every project is important to start defining support matrix and compatibility matrix. And this is both for the user, first of all for the user, and second for the sanity of the maintainers. Because at a certain point, otherwise the level of toil just explode. So if you start in CAPI, we did a couple of rounds before doing the V1 beta 1 work on the release page, and now we have decent compatibility matrix. But yeah, I think that's the key, because if you don't have rules, then if you look at this from a customer perspective, for a user perspective, every request is just fine. Instead, if you start setting some boundary, the user just understand what are the rules of the things, and if they want something different, it is sort of easy to tell, hey guys, yeah, that's nice, but we need to figure it out. Who is going to do the work and maintain it, etc., etc. So it is always a trade-off between what you would like to do and what you can actually do.
Those are great points, and I'm taking notes because I need to set some boundaries in the Carpenter project.
Okay, we are at the end of our agenda. I will give a quick provider update since we talked about this. In Cap V, we are bumping to the V1 Beta 2 contract and the V1 Beta 2 API. We already did a first good chunk of the work. Okay, we are at the end of the discussion. If there are no last second topic, I think we can have some time back. Going once, 2, 3 times. Thanks, Mike, for recording and taking note. See you next week. Bye-bye.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks for raising.
Bye.